Good morning. Welcome back to Global Media Network LLC. And today we have a special host with her special podcast called State of Our World. The special host is hailing from Singapore, independent of China. Thank you very much, Viki Esther Chang. And I am acting as her co-host, and you all know me, Lillian S. And the S doesn't stand for stupid. No. Lillian Sarah Caldwell. Thank you very much. And as you know, our station represents education, enlightenment, and entertainment, especially when I don't pronounce the names correctly. And you people have so much fun pointing that out to me. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Viki Esther Chang. Good morning, Viki.
Good morning to you, Lillian, all the way at Pennsylvania, if I'm right. And I am here at 10 p.m. Singapore time in the evening. We actually had we had an early dinner, but we're going to have a supper with my husband after this. We're going to drive out, but I'm so glad to be with you. Singapore is a tropical city-state, island city-state, 1 degree north of the equator, near to the South China Sea. And here, if I look out with binoculars, South China Sea is just right at my shore, and that's where the sparks are happening right now. Thank you so much, Lillian. Yes, and this is State of Our World, Humanity, for better or for worse, and a little bit about Singapore. We are all welcoming, a very small island. If you drive from the west to the east side of the island, you only take 1.5 hours drive. So it is as small as that, and it is 700 square kilometers large. So it is small, but I'm really blessed to be here, living here, born here, living here, Lillian. This is a country whereby we uphold law and order. We respect all kinds of colors, race, religion, and gender. So I'm brought up in a very, I should say, brought up in a very fortunate country. And in my time, I'm respected as a woman. I'm respected for my age. Even when I was young, I think Singapore gives equal opportunity for you to move up the social mobility ladder with a lot of equal opportunity for career. We actually uphold the principle of meritocracy very much. So whomever does the better job can take the prize. I don't care what color, what language, man or woman, or in between or outside or between or both. As long as you can do the job, you get the prize. And I think I am very privileged to know that as I travel around the world. I've traveled over 25 countries. I've been to the US. I've lived in communist China. I've lived in Europe, and now I'm back in Asia again. I would like your audience to know that this is a beautiful country, and I invite all of you, Lillian, your audience, and your listeners to come by Singapore to look at what a beautiful country we are. So I'm really proud and fortunate, and thank God that we've got a little bit of peace here. But peace is not something that we should take for granted. Our lives is not something that we should take for granted. Therefore, the podcast season, State of Our World, Humanity, for better or for worse. And I'd like to start off this quote from you where we left off, because it was such an intense podcast episode with you, Lillian. You're all over Facebook now. I like your quote. That is, you said this: my grandparents were born in the late 1890s. They lived until after the Vietnam War. During that time, they went from no electricity to electricity, no indoor plumbing to plumbing, horsepower to plane power, train power, and cars. and went from women being married, having lots of children, to transgender, homosexual, and anyone can get married. They lived through two world wars in Korea. We are born, you are born after the World War II in the 50s and partial 60s. We have experienced, I look at it as the baby boomer generation. We have experienced the advent of television, radio, cable, calculators, cell phones, computers. There are not two football fields large,
Yeah.
and the space age. We experienced the beginning now of artificial intelligence. And singularity in 20 years,
Yeah.
marriage of machine and human equal cyborg. That is how I look at it. We are going through possibly World War III. And after that, you don't have to worry because civilization will not exist. So now that encapsulates the whole spirit of state of our world, I should say, because you beautifully encapsulated in a paragraph of 8 to 10 sentences the whole history, almost 200 years, the changes that we've been through, your grandparents' generation, the baby boomers' generation, your generation, my generation, and now we're going to leave the world to a future generation. So we are right now in a very, very precarious point in the world. We always say that this is the most dangerous point in history, right? But it gets more and more precarious, right? It's where it's going to tilt. Know where, when the bucket is going to fall. So I like to start off today. A question to you, Lillian. Now we've got two world wars now, and today I just read Bill Gates. He just said, I mean, I read a lot of news. He's not the only one I read, of course. He's such a controversial figure, but he's saying that we will have two world wars and more pandemics coming, world pandemics coming. So let's talk about these two wars right now in another part of the world where you and I were not living there. But of course, I would hope that, humanity will be at peace again. But I'm going to throw this question to you. Um, Looking at the current affairs, looking at the news, do you think Putin or the wars or Israel, with all these big egos, um, masculinity fights, wanting to win, like what you say, the victor wants to write history. Tell me what you see is happening and what do you see will portend from here, Lillian?
As a student of history, I've always loved history, folks. I just ate it up because whether you like or agree with the trite expression that history recycles itself, and the fact that if you don't know your history, it will repeat itself. Now, we studied, for better or for worse, World War One, but really World War Two. The war ended in the mid-40s. I was born in 51. That's only 7 years. And we got a very detailed account of what started the war. And it started with World War One when the Archduke was assassinated. That's all it took, folks. But he was an important enough political figure to upset his allies. So why did we have World War II? Because Germany lost World War I, and they wanted to get back at the people who took away what they believed was their inherent right to dominate and rule. You're going to hear that a lot from me, so get used to it. Those are the language. World War II started without the United States because at that time, the citizens of the United States couldn't be bothered to fight a war that was over there, over there. Spread the word over there. Yeah, we weren't involved. All the rest of it is the Yanks are coming. You should know. If you have no idea about it, I think you ought to brush up on it. Yeah, because it's that important. And Germany invaded with no provocation Poland. And like the domino effects that Eisenhower spoke about, yes, Eisenhower, Dwight D., he's a World War II hero. I suggest you look him up as well. In fact, I think they're doing a movie on him with the gentleman who was in The Mummy, Brandon someone. My apologies, I never remember names. So Eisenhower is a big wig, along with MacArthur. Yeah, he was a very arrogant man, but he was good at his job. Most generals usually are. And the United States didn't get involved until the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Here's another good one for you. Roosevelt knew a year ahead of time that the Japanese was going to attack. And why didn't he do anything? Because he needed an excuse to get involved in the war. I think they called them the Hawks. Moving right along. So that's how we got involved in both world wars. Now, I was taught that when a war is fought on 3 fronts, it's a world war. So let's see. Number 1, Putin invaded the Ukraine to take back its territory because, excuse my language, they were pissed off that these peons had the nerve to break away. I mean, the United States did it in their own country. It was called the Civil War. But I digress. And then Hamas attacked Israel. We know how well that's going. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just need one more front. Side note, Holland is preparing for World War III. Why? Because all the Scandinavian countries are so small, and the question is, how small are they? If you put them all together, they form one country, even though they're separate countries, and they speak German. So think about that. Also, Iran and Lebanon are very upset and want to join the conflict against Israel because they think Israel are arrogant, son of, well, whatever. So it won't take much for a third front. Oh, and let's not forget, if a potential Republican candidate is not elected, he's trying to blackmail the United States citizens with war if he doesn't get his heart's content. And that would be the third front. Now, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question, and please text your answers to Viki Chang, and she can provide her email to you or her phone number, whichever comes first. And that question is, how do you feel about being blackmailed into voting for a gentleman who can't even get it together while doing a debate? And yet he heckled Biden and the Democratic Party for the same fault with the current president of the United States. Now, I know that most of us do not use your brain. It is a stated fact that most people sit on their brain and their asses they use for intelligence. We already know that. So I'm not disputing that or even debating the issue. However, when somebody uses fear and manipulation, and intimidation, and let's face it, that's what the brown coats and the Nazis were all about. Stormtroopers, ring a bell, someone? You just don't have to be black and Jewish to be thrown into a concentration camp. Talk to all the French liberators who were in the resistance, who landed up in these camps. So all I'm saying is know thy history. And yes, you're going to have a lot of people tell you it never happened. Well, and I will tell you this, I'll be more than happy to take you to some of these cemeteries in which my ancestors, circa the 1940s, who are dead thanks to these camps, and show you the intricate tattoos that were branded on them and became a number instead of being a person. Just saying, there are two sides to every story, and that's a third front there.
Third front, yes. So you've got a possible third front in many possibilities.
Yes,
So 3 points make a world war.
makes the world
What
war.
what is that possibility, Lillian? I mean, it could be hypothetical, but in your view, is it really going to be happening? And what do you see? If you look at history, is it going to be the next 5 years, or is it going to be just always chittering towards that?
I'll tell you what, folks.
Yeah.
When I was growing up in the 1950s and early 1960s, we would have bomb drills. And we would all go downstairs to the basement with our coats and put the coats over our heads for the atomic bomb to be dropped. Needless to say, the collapse of the building would kill us far quicker than the atomic bomb. On the other hand, we also had Martian and invader drills for when the spaceships with all the Martians should arrive, and we were instructed to crawl under our desks and go into a fetal position.
That happened.
And it really happened. You can look at me and say, oh, come on, Caldwell, get a life. Well, I was born in 1951 and I am now 73 years old, and this is my life. They did not have air raid shelters. In fact, England is still going to use the original air raid shelters in the underground should there be an atomic blast. Side note, the United States has developed a new atomic bomb, but
Tell
it's
us about
too
that.
risky to try it or even test it out. So move over, Manhattan Project. How do I know about the Manhattan Project? Because my grandfather was head security in the military after serving as the provost marshal in the Philippines. And I have everything an historian needs. Proof, if I wanted to, he even left a blueprint for making the original atomic bomb, which compared to what's going on these days is very, well, simple. Now, the threat of war. The threat of war has been hanging over our heads since Germany lost the war, along with Japan. Japan has never forgiven us for dropping 2 atom bombs on their cities, and look what happened to their civilians and residents. And while it bothers me, compared to some of the stories my father brought back from the South Pacific where he encountered the Japanese, let's just say I'm a little bit prejudiced. They used to use him for target practice when he would climb up to dislodge the seaweed from the top of the submarine. And he had the scars and bullets to prove it. It's all how you look. It is called relativity. So I can understand the Japanese being upset, but I had friends, or I should say my parents had friends that were bombed at Pearl Harbor. And I don't recall hearing the Japanese apologize for that attack yet. I just thought I would remind you how complicated history is.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Lily,
everything is relative and everybody comes from a large family or
and
friends.
yeah, and the state of our world right now, it's so precarious. Like what you say, what started in World War I, it just was a spark. It was just a spark. It just needed a spark.
It just needed a spark. And unfortunately, whether you like it or not, ladies, men are still very much in control of our political and military future. Don't kid
Yeah.
yourself.
So I would love for you to come on again to talk more about history. Let's talk about women. You know, I know that America now it's in the heat of this American election that I'm no part of. But it will be interesting to hear from you, an American, and you have seen through so many of your presidents already in your lifetime. Whichever way it's gonna take, the world is gonna follow, right? Um, do you think whichever president um, who is going to be elected very soon in about 70 days, 60 days or
Yeah,
so?
November
Um,
2nd, it's voting day.
yeah. So, do you think it's something that you will celebrate, and then that you think the world would also heave a sigh of relief, whichever way? I don't know. So, take it away.
I believe, again, with the political cartoons, I love them because it gives people the freedom of speech and thought and tell it from their perspective. So while the potential Republican candidate says very nastily
Mm.
that Kamala Harris doesn't know what color she is, there's a cartoon of him in a tanning parlor getting sprayed brown paint for a tan to go and make his blonde hair look good.
Oh,
And as a child, I could never understand the racial prejudice in this country against Black people because more than 2/3 of white people spend enormous sums of money trying to get Black during the summer and during the winter. And yet they hate these people. And I don't understand, if you spend that much time hating somebody, why are you be trying to get their skin color? I'm sorry, folks. It just doesn't make much sense to me.
so
However,
Lillian, yeah. On
that's
in
what
November. In
Americans,
November, what do you think will happen? What do you think? What's
I
your
think,
prediction?
I may be wrong, but after last night's performance with Mr. Trump, and don't mistake me, folks, they're running neck
Yeah.
and neck
Yes.
because he has
47,
a lot of
46.
people who want power.
Mm.
That's what it's all about. Put your right foot in, take your right foot out, and shake it all about, then do the hokey pokey and turn yourself around. And that's what this presidential election is all about. And you may laugh, but Mr. Trump is using behavior and mind over matter. If you say it long enough, it will stick.
Mm. I get it.
My
Mm.
prediction,
Yeah.
be that as it may, is every other civilized or
Mm.
uncivilized country has had already women in powerful positions. The United
Mm.
States, for all its boasting,
Has not.
bragging, democracy first, we are the greatest. Oh, wait, that's with Rocky. Sorry about that. They haven't had a woman president yet, let alone a woman of color as president. So let me remind you, God has a sense of humor. Now, on my mind, God is schizophrenic. He wears many faces, many personalities. He adapts to what he needs to do in order to win that particular culture, society, political, religion, so he can make them happy.
So, Lillian, I think I get the answer. So, I want to now quickly dive in. Um, you know, we have talked about so much about women in this couple of years, and I told you that I've traveled to so many countries, and I it's finally found that me being a woman born in this time of our lives, and also this place, Singapore. Women are well respected. We've got equal opportunity with men. We've got equal opportunity for education. We've got equal opportunity for career growth and development. Even though, well, statistics show that men are still mostly in control, but we work on the principle of meritocracy.
I believe.
Even in the class, well, if you've got 70 marks and you're a girl and someone has got 50, you're a boy, well, the girl gets promoted to be the prefect of the class, right?
Right.
I want to ask you this question, whether it happens in the US. When I was living in France, I've got friends, girlfriends, who tell me that, hey, their grandparents or their grandmothers told them that when they were young, when the grandmothers were young, they couldn't even open a personal account in their own name as a woman. They've got to have their fathers or their brothers or their husbands. And she told me, being a French woman, she told me that that's impossible, and that happened in France. So I just want to ask you this, with so little knowledge about history, and I've got to acknowledge to you, I study a lot about I study a lot about business. I read a lot, but very little um, study in history, which is so important as I get older, because you become wiser. So I want to know, from your understanding of history and yourself and your parents, etc., and your environment, um, are women really a disadvantaged gender at your time, and is it of equality already right now?
Let me put it this way. When my grandmother was a young woman back
Mm,
in the very early 1900s, she marched down in bloomers, Fifth
mm,
Avenue, carrying a sign for women's rights.
yeah.
And she was thrown into jail. And
Why
her
does she have to do
husband,
that? Why does
she
she have to
wanted,
do that?
because women were property along with
Oh.
children. They belong to their husband, master. When women
Mm,
married in the States up until that time, all their assets went directly into their husband's bank accounts, and they did not have any money. Even the clothes on their back belonged to their husband. Girls were brought
mm,
up and expected to get married to a wealthy husband to help support the family. My grandmother was married by an arranged marriage. It was unfortunate that they hated each other on sight. They did manage to have two children in spite of it, and both children went to college because the husband believed girls needed an education just in case the unexpected happened, which is very forward thinking for
yeah.
somebody being born in the 1890s. So, and then you read about the women in Britain who don't want to go to college. They
Mm,
want to be taken care of by their husband. They don't
mm,
care whether they have equal rights or not. And I'm not going to say shame on you, because I was a single mother for 16 years. I was married for 30 years, and no, my husband was a great person. He supported women's rights. So I didn't have any of that trouble. I've been a widow now for almost 7 years. Let me tell you something. When and if I ever get married again, I am looking forward for the guy to step in because he can have it. Enough is enough. But I paid my dues, and these young girls haven't paid their dues. They haven't been responsible. I took care of two parents, one with cancer, the other one with Parkinson's. I took care of them until they passed, while going to school at night, raising my son, and working several jobs to make ends meet. Oh, and writing a book. I don't like to be idle. I was brought up with idle hands is the work of the devil, and I certainly don't want him in my life. So I just think, again, things are relative. In the United States, women hit a glass ceiling, and they're still fighting to get equal pay for equal work. They still do not receive it. A lot of it I blame on religion. Wake up, folks. That's how they control you. That's why in the Middle Ages they didn't want the peasants to learn how to read because they could start a revolution. Oh, wait, they did that anyway, didn't they? Rich does good that way. But that's one of the reasons. And of course, you can manipulate and control and dominate
Yep.
people better if
Yes.
they're ignorant.
Yes.
Of course, in the United States, that's a laughable thought because even with all the democracy we have, the majority of people, their reading level is third grade. Makes you wonder, huh? And we're way below the Asian kids when it comes to math and science. Something to think about. Even the kids from, communist China. Well, we will go into that another time, folks.
I hope so. You
I
know,
think,
we want to continue this line of talking about women's development and women's recognition of importance in the world. I hope that we could come back, even though I wanted to sign off this as the final episode for the podcast, but because I really want to tap into your understanding of history and as an education for us to capture your essence of your understanding and your knowledge and your words of wisdom for the audience, we should come back as an encore. Now, I'm going to ask you for an encore episode, if that's fine with you, Lillian. Maybe sometime, yeah, I will ask you to come back for an encore episode. And I want to talk about some of the things you brought up, even though we are talking about women right now, because it's something that I really want to stop you in your track before we forget. And I want to remind the audience, this is something that's been in my mind. You did talk about people not using their brains, sitting on their brains, right?
right?
You did talk about it's easier to control people if they're not thinking and if
Yes.
they're ignorant. Now, there's something that the communists like to use the policy. I'm not quite sure if you know that. It's, they really want to make people ignorant, like keep the people stupid policy.
Yes. I mean, the SARS said it very nicely. I think
Wait,
anything,
hold on, because I want this to be really deep, and I want to pose this question to you. What countries, what society, what part of history, or even current history, um, people in power that are still using this policy in the mechanism to keep people stupid, to keep people quiet, to silence the people? And you brought up a point about fear, keeping the people in fear. If you could put these forces together and give us some parts of history and some parts of the things that you know, tell us about how are these policies being used in history or in current history to control and make people submissive and be docile followers. So, I really want this to be the teaser for your encore episode. Will you do that, Lillian?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, and children 3 years old and up who
Yeah.
like to read, or mommy and daddy can read it to you, go out and buy the science fiction book Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit
I
450.
do not remember the science fiction author's name. I will at 2:00 tomorrow morning wake up and say, that's who wrote it. But for right now, but it's a classic. Read it. Why 451? That is the temperature one needs to burn books. In Florida, Santos approved of burning books.
Burning the books.
And there's a political cartoon where a teacher is standing in front of a third grade class and she holds up a list of banned books and said, children, these are the books we need to read this semester.
And what happened?
And that's the cartoon. And basically what the guy is, or lady, excuse me, ladies, is saying is that if they're burning these books, they are afraid of what it is going to stir up in your mind. Think coffee, think energy drinks, think drugs,
For them.
think spiritual journey. At least think, as IBM used to say. Use that gray matter. Talking
Lillian, Lillian, this is a big, big topic. I hope that you can enlighten our audience and our listeners. These are huge forces.
That's what I would recommend, is to read that book. And there's one other called Penguin Island, and he was written by a French author. And what he did was to take all of French history and religion, and he has this priest who is nearly blind get into a stone boat, and he sails across the ocean, and he comes to an island where he sees what he believes are people dressed in black and white. So he baptizes them. And then in the second chapter, there is a debate between God and the devil, whether they should make these penguins who are now been baptized in Roman Catholicism into people because they've been baptized. And they throw it back and forth, and they're turned into people who are black and white. And it's a satire, but it's a political satire.
Yeah.
And basically,
what's the name of that book? What's the name of the book?
Penguin, Penguin Island.
The black and white.
I think the last name is Atoll. I do not remember the first name, but it's a classic, folks. Those two books you should read.
So you know what, Lillian, state of our world, humanity for better or for worse. If you agree, I'll invite you for an encore episode. And when I started, I love your quote. I wrote that out, and I actually made that into a promo brochure here. I'm not quite sure you can see that with your picture here. I can see
some lettering. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to Facebook, the Platinum platform, or go to my profile, Viki Esther Chang. This is podcast season, State of Our World, Humanity for Better or for Worse. We have talked about today with Lillian, history of World War I, World War II, encapsulated in like 5 to 10 minutes, quickly. But that's why people must tune in, because you get to have the essence very quickly, and it intrigues you to want to know more, right? And I think we need education through podcasts to the people. That's one of the fastest way. Digital is the era, right? Next, we did talk about women's status historically for the last 200 300 years, how it was, what it is, and then I would like you to come back to tell us what it should be. Tell us in your encore episode. And also, I'd like you to talk about um, mechanisms, forces, not conspiracy theories, but from history. How do you keep people using such mechanisms and forces to really like hammer them down so that they never get up? So I like to hear from you, Lillian. Um, Lillian, we wouldn't have a lot of time for the our project promotion, but I'd like to make a shout out to It's My Life memoirs that you are the one of the writers to help your listeners audience or my listeners audience to write about their life. And very quickly, for the conclusion, I liked what you said in our last podcast, that only the victors write history, right? And I
Yes.
really like that, and that kind of encapsulate why we're only reading certain history stories and certain books from only one perspective. You start to think. So, Lillian, tell us about this. It's My Life, and how people can uh, connect with you to get their history written, to get their stories written.
The best way that I find to retell your life experiences is to sit down, don't laugh, either with a cup of tea or maybe a half a glass of wine that's been diluted, not you, the wine, and talk with your husband or boyfriend or talk to the cat or the dog. They're really good, they never interrupt. Or talk to the mirror. You can do that. People don't think you're crazy. But the object is calm your mind and think about when you were a child and say to yourself, what would I've liked to have learned or heard from my parents when I was picked on because? Or
Mm,
I used to write a blog on Facebook called What to Do When.
mm,
And that's what your memoir is going to be about. What did you do when something happened? Because that's when the best of you comes up to the surface and makes itself known,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and we will be talking more about the memoir and the memoirs. It's My Life, written with yourself, written with Lillian, and myself as the publisher, for you to tell your stories and make it into your legacy, so that
Absolutely. If
you could actually pass on your stories and your life to your children and your grandchildren. Yes, Lillian.
I will put it this way for those who like to read, if Smeagol/Goulem had the opportunity to write his memoirs, he would start with the ring forced me to kill my friend. It made me do it. I am blameless in this matter.
Blameless in the matter. Yeah. So, Lillian, thank you so much for inviting me to your radio, which is Passionate World Talk Radio, and myself here, the Platinum platform. And this is podcast season, State of Our World, Humanity for Better or for Worse. You can find Lillian below, and you can find myself, Viki Esther Chang, and my profile with a blue tick on Facebook. Lillian, over to you. I'd like to sign off from Singapore. It is 10:44 p.m. on a Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday evening.
Before she turns into a pumpkin. Good night, Vicky, and thank you for allowing me to join you tonight.
Yes, and I hope that you will come back for an encore episode sometime this week. Ladies and gentlemen, please look up for the time and the date. And then you can also write to us, State of Our World, humanity, for better or for worse, the most intense podcast of 2024. Write to us, Lillian and myself, about what's the most urgent issues in your world right now. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Sleep well. Ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this evening, depending on what part of the world you are in, and we will see you at another time. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.